Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And with me, Robbie.
And this week we follow up our recent episode on 28 Days Later with its sequel, 28 Weeks Later.
Yes, we're not making you wait 28 weeks to listen to it, though. The temptation was there.
But exactly 28 weeks later. We will release that episode.
Yeah, but no, we thought, because we both, well, I've definitely seen this a few times, and I think you said you may have seen it. You weren't really too sure.
Yeah, I thought I had. I knew the opening of this film very well, but I wasn't so sure about the rest. And to be honest, even while I was watching this, I was like, I'm not sure for a good section. And then something happened. I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Maybe I have.
I know that. I remember this bit, but it was a side of. I was like, I literally forgot the majority of what happens in this film. Which, in contrast to like 28 Days Later, where I literally could remember almost majority scene for scene, apart from one or two sections that I do remember saying, oh, I forgot that little bit happens earlier in the film and stuff like that. But most of the structure I remembered. This one structure, I was like, I can't remember what the hell happens to any of these. I don't know what happens to these kids. I don't know what's going on with Robert Carlyle.
Yeah, something's
I have no idea what's going on there. So yeah, this was, I think, only the second watch for me.
It's a weird film because every time I watch it, and I mean I haven't watched it for many years, but I remember getting to a certain point, and I have the same problem with this film, and every time I kind of forget about it, and I'll kind of get to it when we reach it, but I always kind of thought that I preferred this to 28 Days Later. I'm not sure where that thought came from. I
remember you saying that in the last episode, and I remember certain elements and being like, maybe I'm just forgetting what 28 Weeks Later was like.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help while watching it being like, this isn't better than 28 Days Later.
Yeah, definitely. As I was watching it, I was like, nah.
It has some really good scenes that do kind of like, I think, rise this up a little bit from where my mind was taking it, but it is. I just think overall, there's just something that just feels off about. I don't know. Well, I've been thinking about like what makes this one feel a little bit off at times for me. And I think we'll probably get through that through the episode in bits.
Well, I mean, for me, I think it like kind of jumping straight to what feels off for me. And it, as we look through the kind of production and stuff like that, it may be that I'm completely wrong about it, but it almost feels as if like the film kind of mirrors the 28 Weeks Later itself, and the distinction between 28 Days Later to 28 Weeks Later. So 28 Weeks Later, obviously, that amount of time has passed, and the infection has been contained within the UK. However,
good old NATO's come in.
Good old
US.
The good old US of A have come to save.
They have become our saviours, or our doom,
or our doom. And effectively, that's what I feel is the problem with the film. It's kind of about how America kind of come over and they set up this small quarantine and they start to rebuild things, and it almost feels as if this film is a lot more action and does kind of steer away from that small, intimate horror to being kind of a bit more of a balls-to-the-wall action film.
Yeah, definitely. That is a case, I think, definitely, especially as the film goes along, where it starts to feel like they're setting up quite an intimate thing. And even when it does get into this bigger thing, it still feels like they're trying to maybe focus on a couple of key characters. And then suddenly it just feels like it just goes, now this is just an action movie. And we're trying to be an action movie. But like even then, the problem is, like, I guess when you compare it to other, like, say, within the genre of like actiony ones, it starts to feel a little bit at times, I guess, where you've got certain scenes when you're like, this no longer feels like that really chaotic horror that we had with 28 Days Later. Like I will definitely say, I think that the people with the rage virus, away from Robert Carlyle, majority of them were not as nearly as, I don't know if it was the movement, the way it was shot, they just didn't feel as chaotic, as like high energy, as like in your face. It didn't feel so like terrifying that of what I thought they were in the scenes that you got in the original 28 Days Later, which isn't actually tons and tons of scenes in the original.
No, it's not many.
But when they do, they make an impact. Whereas this one, when we've got a lot more at one point in the film, it starts to blur that line between what made 28 Days Later special and then what is just a standard kind of zombies coming after people or whatever you kind of...
Yeah.
You know, what's that difference between... I guess the original 28 Days Later had that kind of key split between the creature, the rage monsters being, you know, the main threat, and then it kind of changed to humanity being the main threat. And then in this one, it has some of that, but the themes seem to get a little bit muddled at some point in the film, and it kind of loses track of like, what is it exactly you want to do here? I feel like there's a lot of kind of there's a lot of like a split personality of this film where it's like, I feel like you've got very much maybe like 28 Days Later and Danny Boyle and Alex Garland hanging over them. Yeah. And then you've got the new director, Jean-Carlos Fresnadillo.
Fresnadillo, yes.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, like him, and I know that he brought in a lot of his own like people he works with to be screenwriters alongside him. Because I know that Rowan Joff, who is now quite a renowned director in his own right, he wrote the original script of this. And then John Carlos brought in several of his own, like, more people he works with to rewrite the script because he felt the original script was a bit underbaked. Yeah. And I feel like you can feel a little bit of that in this film where it feels like two very different tones from what I get. And even at times, it's weird. Like, the original 28 Days was brutal, but this has one or two scenes that are, like, beyond that brutality. It's like fucking like, it's like angry, brutal, like it's like, but it doesn't feel completely out of like character to begin with, but then oddly the way that they react, and I guess this is them taking it their own way, but the way that even the rage monster starts to react in this film in certain cases starts to be a bit like, that no longer quite feels exactly like the same one we previously had, which I guess you can take it your own way. But I'd already say, like, I can't imagine Danny Boyle and Alex Garland taking some of those, like, rage elements that they add into this film and being like, yeah, we're going to add that into the next one. I'm not so sure whether that will be a case.
It's an odd one.
That they'll keep.
Yeah, I think it is a film very much of two parts, and they do feel a bit distinct from each other, and that's where some of the murkiness comes from. Because it sets up, it has an incredible opening. And one thing I think that is definitely that definitely shows the impact of the strength of this is you have the iconic theme from 28 Weeks Later. I'm not sure who did it, but it kind of sounds very Muse-like. I don't know whether it is actually Muse who do it. I seem to remember like downloading it on like LimeWire or something once, and it's saying it was Muse, you know, but I don't think it actually is.
It's John. It was the same in this one and the last one. That theme was done by John Murphy, composer. So it wasn't a lot. I think a lot of people commonly do because it is a very. I believe what was it? World War Z used Muse, like the Muse, or the lead singer of Muse, or
Matt Bellamy.
They used him to make the soundtrack for that, and there's a very similar kind of feel. It sounds very similar, and it's very Muse-like, but I believe that it's not. I don't
heavily
know,
inspired,
unless I may be wrong, but I don't believe that they actually had any part of this. I believe that was fully him as a composer, unless he asked them to perform his music. Could be why,
potentially, but I'm pretty sure that it doesn't feature in.
Because John Murphy, as I said like last time, like has some amazing scores and stuff like that, and works with Danny Boyle quite a lot. Yeah, and he has some amazing like atmospheric, like really beautiful, haunting kind of themes that he makes.
And it's incredibly used in this film because I don't think it's in 28 Days Later. I think because I remember watching 28 Days Later, and I'm sure I was waiting for the theme to come, but I don't think the one we're talking about.
In the opening. That's at the end of 28 Days Later when they're inside the house. That's the theme that runs through the whole time they're in the house at the end. Yeah.
I must have just
it is that same
theme,
yeah. The theme that is at the start of this film is the theme that is the same theme that ran it up like the whole time they're like fighting in the house.
Yeah.
He's going through the house. That's when basically the guy gets taken off of the guy that's the chain. Yeah. The music starts proper like building, and then it's like that whole like.
I must have been too scared to take in. You know, I was too scared,
too intimidated
to take it in. But the whole, the opening is just incredible, where you have these, you know, you have Robert Carlyle and his wife, and they're trying to like basically get their life back on track, trying to live as normally as they can. You know, they're cooking pasta. Rob, I was calling him Rob Carlyle as if I know him. Robert Carlyle's found like a bit of wine, and they have this elderly couple that they're living with. And you get the impression that like the world has gone to shit, but there's still an element of humanity in there. And I know you mentioned during 28 days later when we spoke about that, Danny Boyle did kind of direct the opening of this, and maybe that's where, because there's quite a lot of heart in the opening. And then you have that one bell end who's talking about the girl's boyfriend has been gone for like 3 or 4 days. He's not coming back.
Yeah.
And then you have the little boy outside, and then that leads to the rage creatures, monsters, not zombies, finding their way in.
And then suddenly there have been absolutely bloody tons of them.
That
come over.
And it's quite heartbreaking, man, because you get like the elderly couple who, you know, I always found that really tough, where he's kind of like holding the door and she gets dragged away. And you do find out what happens to the guy, the other chap, don't you? The one who jumps out of the window. He gets the boat.
He's back on the boat. I was going to say. I was like, oh, did he just get caught outside? But yeah, he appears at the boat when he's away. But yeah, it's also, for a character kind of part of it, it's also a really like interesting character choice to have at the start of this film. The idea that he literally decides to fucking abandon his wife.
Yeah, it's like, fucking brutal.
Fuck, I'm out, man. I'm leaving.
But it's an incredible thing, because it's
she won't leave the child.
She won't leave the child.
He's quite more willing to be like,
fuck the kid, man.
Fuck the kid. Like, he's the reason we got to.
Cooked,
even though he's kind of the reason. He's the one that was like, we'll let him in.
Yeah. Like, she was the one who said let him in, and he's like, no, because he knows. But then you have that conscious thing of being like,
opening the door.
In that your humanity it would be really hard to be like,
I'm just going to listen to this child getting absolutely brutally to death,
killed, and then there's still a chance,
which is what happens anyway.
It happens anyway, yeah. But there's still a chance that if that happens, they will find you. Yeah, like, there's still a chance, you know. So it's a brutal one, but it's a great character moment.
It is. It's a really interesting way to set up a thing, and especially when obviously that this leads to like a twist in the plot later on. You're like, oh, actually, there's more to this, because you just think it's. At first, it feels like just a secret that he's going to have to keep, kind of thing. Yeah, it's always really weird to me, the idea like that his kids were off in like, I think they said like
they were in France.
Yeah,
it's not too weird to me, because you think like, I mean,
to make their way, but I guess it's because they've just managed to get back over. Like, isn't it? Like after all the time that's passed, they've only just been
allowed to go.
You know, not that 28 weeks is actually as long as you mean. Like that's not as long as you quite think. But
the main thing I find weird is that they were both away on a school trip, because they're clearly like such different years,
different ages.
If they were like the same age, I'd be like, okay, like the class was on a trip, that's cool. But she's like 16 and he's like 12, and it's like, so your whole school was on
went to France.
France school trip, you know?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of an odd, like the whole like set, like having him like back with my kids, like we survived by living out in a little house of things, but our kids were like somewhere, not knowing what has happened to us. But no, the whole, and I do think that this, but there's one difference, is the opening shot clearly I think looks quite different than some of the other shots in the film as well. Just the chaotic energy with it.
It still has the frantic,
the really frantic, quick uses of like quick shots, quick cuts, that big wide shots that we get. The beautiful, like the whole field where he's legging it, and you've got all of them, and more are coming at the sides and stuff like that.
It's exhausting to watch, because you just think like, it's fucking brutal. I think there's something about the scope of it as well, because we spoke about during 28 days later, it's in terms of how many rage people you see, it is quite small and it's quite intimate. You don't see a whole load at a time. You might only see about 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But seeing like, seeing like 15, 20 of them, and not only just like behind him, but there's a shot of Bobby Carlyle where he's running and he's looking behind him, and then you see them kind of like cresting the hill and coming over, and you're like, fuck, like
they're speeding behind you, like how the hell are you going like getting away from this? You're just running. Like what point are you going to be like, I'm out?
What point you're like, I'm fucking I'm gone,
then then when he gets that boat, it's like, shit, like the dude gets like completely knocked out into the water. It's like, there's no. I've already left my wife, so fuck you. Mate. You're cooked.
You leave that guy easy, but the wife's the difficult.
The wife's slamming on the window when you like run away. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep running, mate. Like that is such a brutal.
It's so brutal, and I think it sets up a really interesting story because that's when we then jump to the children kind of coming back into the Isle of Dogs, and you see that like they do a lot of exposition talk of the US Army has come here to help out and to save the day, and you can tell that the film has got a bit of a kind of an American influence to it because it it feels very hoorah.
You get a lot of those scenes. You get a lot of, obviously, we get quick moments with like Jeremy Renner's and Idris Elba.
I mean, the film does actually does have like a really good cast.
Yeah,
you got Bobby Carlyle, who's the fucking man. We were talking about the Full Monty before. You got Rose Byrne, who for some reason I was just referring to as Jessica Alba. I was like, I said to Anna, like, Jessica Alba's in this, Jeremy Renner's in it. And she was like, oh wow. And then I was like, Big Idris is in this, and she was like, Idris? And I was like, yeah, I was like, it's stacked. And now I've realised
Harold Perrineau, who's well known, especially for things like Lost, obviously, and that he's in a horror series now that's people rave about it. From, I think it's called.
I've heard about From,
and apparently that's like incredible. So I've seen that, like, he's been on the move, and and future stars like Imogen Poots and Catherine McCormick is also a very well known actress. She's well known for like Braveheart and things like that. She was the lady opposite Mr. Mel Gibson. And some of these are used well. Some of these are oddly, like, I think like one other thing here is that Danny Boyle, I think, is a very good director of character.
Yes. And
of showing people off. Even in short times, you get a sense of who they are. He is a very character-oriented director. So, with all the ones, the original, even if you didn't have long exposition of them explaining who they are, you kind of got a good, like, oh yeah, I get what you are. I get what each of your character is. I get who you are. Or even in a short little scene, you can go in like, oh right, okay, that's their background. And now, even if they die 30 seconds later, it's like, okay, it gets a little bit more to it, And I've got to be honest, I don't feel like you get that with most of these ever once. Like, I feel like even though they've got a stacked cast of actors here, I don't feel like a lot of them get much to do. I feel like they're very much like reaction is what they get to do in this. They get to react to things like happening around them. Rose Byrne, Scarlett, she gets more to do, she's more of the protector kind of one. Jeremy Renner gets some bits and like a standout kind of like scenes in this one.
Renner's good.
He's strong. Harold Perrineau as Flynn is pretty much there to just show up in his helicopter occasionally and be like, I'm not going to get you. I'm going.
I'm off.
I'm flying. I'm flying. That's pretty much his role. Apart, like, he's obviously like Doyle's friend, Jeremy Renner's Doyle. And he's like that, and he's like following around London, and you're just every time like, what the fuck? Like, why are you like?
Just laugh.
So I'm going to fly off, and I'm going to meet you at another destination. So now you've got to make to another destination on the other side of London. So because that's really easy to travel across an entire city.
They've got a carpet bomb.
I'm not going to take you. Well, I won't take them, but I'll take you to another destination, and then maybe I'll change my mind.
Yeah,
so it's like it was almost like video game logic of like, crap, we've got to get to the next.
I've got to go somewhere.
I've got to fly off now. Off you go. I'm not saying that he doesn't get. He again gets one scene, not so much because of him, more because of his character's choice of how to like take out some rage monsters. He gets a pretty badass scene. Idris Elba though. Absolute waste of his time.
Well, this is 2007.
I kept on expecting a scene where he stepped up. Mr. Idris Elba stepped up and just, he just flopped it on the table and went, "Here we go, guys, I'm here."
Well, I will.
And he's pretty much the standard chief guy standing in the room, staring at a screen
or something like that. However, this is what I will say.
I mean, this was before he was.
This was before Lufa, so this is before. Like, he became the
UK, but he was in The Wire and he was pretty big, and he was big in The Wire, and he'd already done that by this point, so he wasn't tiny.
No, I'm not saying. But I'm never going to say Big Idris is tiny, but he wasn't Big Idris.
No, he wasn't.
Now, if you say I'm gonna, I want to cast you in a film, and you're not really going to do much. he'll just kill you. Like, so I feel like for the level he was at, it's kind of similar to Jeremy Renner. Like Jeremy Renner wasn't.
No, Jeremy Renner was a bit. He was. That's why none of these are all actors that went on to be more well known than they were now. Like even Rose Byrne, she went on to be as well. Like lots of comedy films, lots of other films that she's done. She was in the X-Men First Class and things like that.
Yeah.
But in this role, all of the actors, Robert Carlyle is probably the big name here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Robert Carlyle wouldn't still be. He's still a very renowned actor. But he was probably like the big one, like he was the one that was the biggest. Like he probably got. I would imagine he got paid the biggest amount of this lot for his scenes in this, especially what he had to do. But yeah, so it is interesting. Like I guess my main gripe because I don't think it's something I would come back to because it's such a passing thing. It's just later in the film we have the whole rage monster thing with Idris Elba's character, and it gives this shot of look as if they know that they're about to almost be invaded by the rage monster. So I was expecting some they've taken over or they've broken their way in, but it just kind of they're coming, and I was like, it looks like you're disheartened, as if does that mean that they're about to get inside or they get thing, and then after that it just never comes back.
No, it just doesn't come back.
It just never goes back to the beginning. So it's did you guys die? Did you?
Are you still alive?
They're already blowing stuff up, so are you dead? Did they blow it up? Have I missed a point here? Yeah. I just felt he just goes. The whole room of them are just bye.
He just disappears, doesn't he?
They're just completely out of the film, and it's gone like that. And there's lots of things, and it could be that they got blown up, and I'm just not taking the very obvious that explosions happened, or we never see any rage monsters come in. But I was at least expecting him to get some kind of violent death scene or something.
Because he's a bit of a bell-end character. So I thought they would have done. They would have given
I thought they
him
were going to come
death.
in, or Bobby Carlyle was just going to come in and literally fucking tear his face apart.
Yeah.
Do so fucking rape his face.
Just gone for him.
Absolutely destroy him.
And they're like, Robert, we need to film this if you're going to do it. He's just gone in rage.
I'm doing it anyway.
I'm going to kill Idris Elba.
I've got on full-on rage mode. I am in character.
I'm a method actor.
I'm a method actor.
Yeah.
I will tear your face off.
So I kind he kind of, Robert Carlyle's Don reunites with his children, and he's got a maintenance job there or something like that. And he basically tells them I tried to stop your mum from dying. She didn't make it. I saw her get bitten or whatever the equivalent. I saw your mum get fucking battered.
I saw her. He basically says that I saw her die,
get curb stomped by some really angry people.
Lying,
horrendous
little liar.
He tells a little lie. But I like it because it kind of it lays the seeds for the character who he is a little bit.
It gives that lingering, and as I said, we get a lot of these little interactions of Scarlett's character, Rose Byrne, gets introduced. We get Jeremy Renner on the roof as the sniper, kind of having things, and we even get a scene of him interacting with the Flynn, the helicopter girl, where it's jumps up he's a rage monster behind him. This all comes in a period of which it's a lot of introduction, a lot of setup of this is what the world is like now, this is what they're doing, and things like that. And to me, it felt like a dip for me.
Interesting, because I quite like it.
Really, I felt like it was a really long time to get to the point of what was going to come with Bobby Carlyle's character, of what he did, and then kind of following from there.
Well, see, I quite like it and this is what I effectively think is that I like that it spends a bit of time building stuff, and then you get the two kids going out to London. They're I don't remember what mum looked like, I don't have any pictures of her, and we get some more nice shots of London, and I feel
I like those things. I think one was for me that I generally found that a lot of I generally found that a lot of it just was a bit bland. I just thought it was a bit there just wasn't much interest to it. I didn't feel I was drawn in by many other characters apart from probably Robert Carlyle's character. The kids were a bit meh.
Yeah, but the kids always.
And I also thought that the kids getting out in this high security is absolutely it's logic of retarded logic.
Yeah, it made no sense.
It's absolutely how the hell if and it gets worse if you look at what it's like later when they're trying to lock things down in the security that by each door and stuff like that. And you're just like, how the hell did these two kids get out of this building?
Yeah.
Why the hell would these two kids think that this is a good idea in any like frame of mind? You know what I mean? Like, I don't like it. It was just the logic, like, really like hampered it for me. Of the idea of just like I was sat watching because Charlotte was actually ended up watching like a fair amount of this film with me because she was like in bed like reading and I was watching it. And even she was like, I thought they were in like a high security thing. I was like, yeah, they were. She's like, what? So why are they out like on the street? I was like,
I can get them out in the street.
Yeah,
because they're allowed to go out, and they even say like, oh, we've got a pub, like keeping it British. But my thing was, how did they get off the Isle of Dog? Because it's that scene where they're like walking over a pipe, and you see like a guard like stood there. And then like a boat goes in,
and it's so fucking easy for them to do.
And it's so easy. It's nicely shot because you have like a bit of like a bird's eye view, and you see the boat go underneath them, and it makes you think, oh, this place is like really heavily guarded. There's a boat with fucking machine guns. But then you're like, but then there's just two kids who just walk along a pipe.
And just get over there
and get out of there.
I mean, I even just the fact that it's just like they are literally like they would literally have only just basically arrived the day before into this complex, and they're already being like, yeah, we can trust those kids to go out around the streets and stuff. That'll be fine. You know, that it just seems far too like easy, like far too like plot armor kind of. You know what I mean? Like, we have to do this just so that we can get to the house and find them.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like they could have done it much better because I like the first act. I think it builds things well, and then when they get back to, I mean, I'll always love those shots of like isolated streets, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I really like them, like in that kind of form. I guess it was just one of those like.
It's the logic of how they get there.
It's the logic of where it comes, and even with the shots, you know, it's nice. You know, they had a bigger budget; they were able to actually clear it more easily this time. So last time when they had to like, which is part of the reason for the standard of the footage, the way it looked on the last one, is because they had to do it all like quick and easy to move about cameras and stuff like that. Whereas with this one, they had more budget, so they could do it like properly and close down the streets properly. But it's really nice seeing those shots. But yeah, it didn't feel as like refreshing and new as it does in the first one. You know what I mean? It still feels like we're going over the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they did anything like that was like as interesting as some of like the little character moments or shots of them.
No.
You know, like him picking up a bag of money and be like, "Oh, I'm going to keep it." You know, like things like that. Or the bus that was toppled over. It's like you've got the budget and all you're doing is showing me McDonald's that's empty.
Yeah, like a pizza place, and I feel like
the pizza place was a bit more, you know, going in with the food or the dead guy, and you know, but even that stuff, it all just felt like really dumbass risk that I just don't think that a girl of her age would be like, I'm gonna sneak in there just so I can get a helmet. She goes in to get a helmet.
Yeah, you're like,
you know, she sneaks all the way.
Keys?
Maybe it was the keys in the
pocket.
It still just like felt like really odd to be like you're walking through it, or you can smell a dead body, and you're just like,
I'll be all right.
You know, this will be fine. This is a smart choice on our part.
I'm making good choices.
Smart. You know, I'm going over here.
I'm the adult in this situation, and it's fine.
I'm going to go and get. I'm going this far, and I get it. You know,
yeah.
Not to judge the idea of like going that far to get a picture of your mother, but it was still a bit like, I
get it because you're thinking it's like kids, you know, so it's kid logic, and
they obviously they do capture, you know, Jeremy Renner's characters, like where they go in and it gets reported, and then obviously this is why like when they enter the house kind of thing, you get that kind of. I just think, I don't know what it is, there's something about the shots in this film that, I don't know, just felt, you know, there was something about the way that Danny Boyle shot the original one, the angles, the fact that we would get a range of different types, you know, like wide angles, but when something was close was happening, it was very claustrophobic.
Yeah.
And this one has a few like more like closed in shots, but I don't know. That's part of the magic that's lost in this one. It's not even necessarily the plot of the story. It's the fact that I just don't think it looks as like. It's weird to say that in the last one I was talking about how like bad it's aged, the look. But that doesn't take away from the cinematography in terms of shots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that there was just a nicer like way on the angle. Like we had some really interesting angles and shots and stuff like that. And I don't know why. I just found a lot of these shots just a bit. They just felt a bit bland to me. They're a bit like we haven't we haven't really like gone for it with this. We could have really like made this much more like little details, much more little textures, much more like different styles and angles. And it feels like we're shooting a lot of this in a very standard like still way.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel as like moving in like
I agree
nervous as the original film.
But then it feels as if they've tried to kind of keep the foot in with 28 Days Later, and they've done that thing that video games did in like 2010 where they just put like a grey filter on everything.
Yeah.
And I noticed that like, and this is one thing that I seem to remember it being a bit more Hollywood and being a bit more like bigger in its in its shots and in how it's shot, and a bit more standard in a way. I liked I do kind of like 28 Days Later, but I feel like it's so frantic and so ugly looking that for me I find it quite hard to watch sometimes. We spoke I think a couple of weeks ago about Dog Soldiers, and that had a kind of similar thing to it, but I almost feel like I forgot that they kind of kept that grainy filter on this, and it almost feels like you don't need to do that. Like you could have got if you're not going to commit to almost trying to do it a bit more guerrilla in the shots and trying to do it a bit more like that,
then you don't need to
then you don't need to have the filter and that style. You can just do it as a more straight standard horror film, because effectively once shit hits the fan, it becomes just a very standard film. You get they go to the house and they find the mother, and she's like an asymptomatic carrier.
Yeah, she has which I believe I read was Danny Boyle's kind of one of his touches he said to add, is the idea of like the hemorrhaging around the eye could represent that actually it's no longer just like the eyes, as if the eye, like something's fighting inside of there kind of thing. It makes it seem more like a split. So the hemorrhaging of the idea that actually people have it but don't have it, and obviously that's a major part of the plot that kind of follows from here after the team come and they gather them and take them all out kind of thing. Yeah,
and it kind of becomes a part of the plot, in this kind of like strange way. They take her name's Alice. They take Alice back to the kind of US base or the Isle of Dog.
Yeah, and they're quite her screams and her reactions to a lot. When she's being like quarantined and having to be like pressurized, like washed and things like that, like feels very like there was something in those kind of scenes that felt very like there is a kind of a very kind of dark like grittiness in like the reality it sometimes pushes at the moment of what they would actually do in that situation, which is one of the more highlights of this film, which I think is more the bit that there are some things when it really pushes the idea of like how people would be treated or how they might react to people, and the fact that you think they'll be like all fair, but actually it's like we to stop this we are going to be like we'll do whatever has to be done.
A gurney,
and that's what I mean. Like when she gets washed and pulled and then they're not like treating her like nicely,
like
even.
A human. They're just like fucking.
And then she is talked about as if they may need to just destroy her, and it's the Scarlet character who is like, but she could be, she could be really important.
Vaccine or a cure.
She's asymptomatic. We may be able to stop this completely, like with her help. And the rest, and Idris Elba's character, like General Stone, is basically just like,
nah.
I was thinking we should just fucking burn the bitch. You know what I mean? Like we should just cut her up and like kill her off now. Like it's like no, but her blood could be like really important.
Yeah,
and obviously that leads to the idea that maybe even her kids could be really important.
Put a bullet in her head.
Which is pretty much leads to where the whole shit really hits the fan. Yeah. Which is Mr. Rob Carlyle, I was going to say, but then I read Don. Mr. Don.
Mr. Don.
Mr. Don sneaks his way, again, into a high security thing that has a thing. He manages to sneak his way past people to a guard into the room with her to apologise because basically, I mean, which doesn't even feel like a full apology. It feels more like, shit, you're going to tell the kids what I did.
You're going to tell the kids. I'm going
to tell the kids. Like, part of me was like, he's going in there to just put a pillar over her
face. Fucking hell, don't say anything.
And there's something really that makes you feel really like, one, you're a little like snivelling little pig. You're a little sniveler. You're a little like you're a little rat. Like, and you're coming back in and you're trying to do that, and she's not really saying anything to you. And then what makes it even grimier, to be fair, then becomes like he's like she's not really like responding to him. She's just almost watching him. we're watching him go through all these stages of the emotions of him basically trying to make up to himself for argument. He never really gets he's not getting forgiveness from her. She's like, you fucking left me to die. I was like, you can get fucked, mate. you know, we ain't gonna. And then he is even going grimier because it does the kiss. But there's something about the kiss that's like she's pinned down to the table and you're trying to kiss her as if it's the weirdest, like ugliest of what could be like a man's logic. If I kiss you, we can make up.
It's like Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, it's literally it's like the old Snow White Sleeping Beauty. It's like all our problems will go away if I just give you a kiss. But it's a really like horrible wet kiss because you see like the saliva like connect between.
Well, they have to
because of where it's going.
And it's also there's a moment where I'm kind of watching it and I'm thinking because she can speak. You know, you're kind of led to believe that maybe she's fucking cooked and she can't speak, but she does say I want to see my kids at one point.
Yeah. She can speak. She just doesn't want. She has like nothing to say to him.
But then she doesn't say to him like, "No, I'm infected."
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that's thinking like, did she want him to become infected? And not necessarily to obviously spread it, but did she want him to suffer? Because
I think she did. And that's why I was wondering whether she knew what might come of this kind of thing, or as if she'd already had. We don't know what happened to her between where she was left and how she got to the house. So it is kind of a like, what does she know? Does she maybe know something else that she doesn't know? Did she give that small boy a little kiss on the cheek? Like,
get out of it, boys!
Or she like sneezed on him. It's like, fucking hell, he's a rage. Kill him.
Get him.
Like, beat him.
But then. Yeah, I mean, it is brutal.
It's fucking horrible. Like, there's no way she wishes for what she gets next because it's fucking horrible.
It's far.
Again, we know she can speak because she said like she speaks and verbally like says stuff out loud. Like it's fucking like screaming.
Oh, it's fucking brutal.
Like, I mean, and to be fair to Robert Carlyle, again, an actor who doesn't need to go as full in with the rage that I feel like he like. I almost wasn't expecting an actor to be like, oh yeah, I'll have the contacts, I'll have all, because in the first one again, you don't really get many of the actors that have to turn like that. So they don't have to do the full prosthetics, the full blood like down his face, all of the parts. And they go pretty full on with him. It feels like he gets like all of the blood that's like dripping out of his mouth. He gets all the, you know. So the fact he goes full for it, I think, is more props to Robert Carlyle. For the fact he's just like the shouting, the screaming, the smashing himself against the walls, the hitting the ground, you know, throwing around, and it's just that thing. If you're like, oh shit, like, and he goes towards the door first, making it think like, I'm going to get my way out of here. Yeah. And it's the fact that little turn his head back as if he's like, nah. And we've got, and it's also this bit which then becomes a part of the plot, which I couldn't really decide whether I really enjoyed. Because this is about one thing that felt so very different, and it's whether it's almost. I feel like I had to read into it and assume almost that he could almost get the scent of an asymptomatic person or something. Yeah, the way that he's like, because obviously this then leads into you think that he's pretty much going to be like he does this and then gets taken out, and that's pretty much as far as it's going to go, and the virus is back out and things like that. But it doesn't. It leads, you know, we like not to go fully into it right this second, but. We see him again throughout and he is almost tracking. Well, this, and this is what I mean. Where it's a film of two parts. It's a weird logic for me, of where this goes with his character. Yeah. Because I thought it was going to be dead and done. Well, you have the great inside the building. Well, you have the great kind of like stampede scene where he does start. You know, he starts taking out. You know. Other kind of military people, and then the infection slowly starts spreading, and all of the civilians and the military personnel who are in this kind of underground facility end up getting locked in, and his two kids are involved in that. The little boy ends up seeing Robert Carlyle in like a hallway, and then he knows he's cooked, so he fucking bolts it, and he climbs up, and then I think, you know, Scarlett finds the daughter and kind of takes her out. Yeah. And you get this great scene where the infection's kind of slowly starting to spread. Robert Carlyle's going sick on people. Yeah. And when it then kind of spills out into the streets. Yeah. Well, because you've got the amazing where one you're like, what's the logic in pushing everyone obviously into the basically the car park? Yeah. You know, and they've basically locked them inside of there. And obviously that's when he, like, Robert Carlyle's character, like, the son sees him through the door and like breaks his way through, doesn't he? Like, but you've got that kind of logic, like, okay, so they are basically just they're going to leave these guys down here and hope that they ever, like, well, it feels like nothing else, but they're like, well, you guys are expendable completely. Yeah. And it's really chaotic. It's really claustrophobic. I like that scene because the lights obviously come on and off and flickering, and you've got this chaotic, like, movement and stuff like that.
We spoke in 28 Days Later when Mark, or whatever his name is telling that story of when they went to the airport, and he kind of, he climbed up. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. This feels very.
It feels
inspired by that.
Yeah, it was inspired by.
Like one person gets it, and then you're like you're not sure who is what, and what's going on. And all of this spread with just this one character absolutely obliterating through the building. Just to go back onto the thing, to be fair though, the wife scene, I did feel the way that he, like, basically gets at her throat, but then literally it's the eye gouging. The eye gouging is like she's already in pain, but I guess it's a really cool way to show, like, the rage is the rage, like, as if, like, he has a vendetta against her. He's like, you goddamn bitch, you're going to tell him. And that it's almost like that still comes out in him when he is turned to rage. Like, all of that stuff he was trying to hide, and probably the fact that he's angry actually that she's back so that his secret's going to get out there, seems to kind of come through. So we get that really horrific, like, death for her. Of the, like, fucking eye, like, the fucking eye guy. You're literally like, Jesus fucking Christ, like, this is horrible. Like, this is one of the harshest deaths in, like, a horror film. I gotta be honest,
it feels worse than the one in 28 Days Later.
What, the
eye gouge in that?
Oh yeah. Because she seems so, like, undeserving of any of this. She's the one that, like, had to survive. She got through. She managed to actually make her way back. She survived, all of this stuff. She's gone through that, and all she really come back to is because she's been trying to get somewhere that she could maybe see her kids again. She's been strapped down, washed out, and now suddenly her fucking husband has turned, and now she's fucking getting her eyes gouged.
His eyes fucking.
It's like fucking nothing. He deserved an eye gouging. She didn't deserve a fucking. You know what I mean? Like, if Robert Carlyle's character was getting an eye gouging from her, you'd be like, he kind of deserved it.
A little bit deserved.
I mean, I'm not sure anyone deserves an eye gouge. No. The thumbs in the eyes may be one of the most disgusting ways to die. Like, it's like literally like brutal. The idea that that would happen to you is fucking horrible. Basically, the pain is what kills you. Such a high level of pain.
It's just fucking brutal, man.
But it's horrible, and and this is obviously one of the stronger sections of the film when we have that outbreak. And then we start to get the moments like Jeremy Renner's Doyle outside, and the them basically being told first, it's like, take out the infected. And it only takes a few minutes for General Stone to decide, actually, we can't work out who the fuck's who, which, is both a horrible thing, and at the same time, there's logic behind it.
There's a skewered logic to it.
You're like, it's skewered, but you are like, in that crowd, all those people spreading out, they're spreading in all directions. Yeah. It's like, how the hell can you actually know, I mean, my logic in my head is a bit more like the fact that it's so easy for them to get through a set of doors and then they can just sprint into all different directions. Yeah. Part of me feels like them quarantining this area off should involve many more walls and areas that actually block them from, This seemed like a very obvious thing that could have been easily avoided. Oh yeah, that's right. It's fine because we've got these giant gates that basically cover this entire area, so there's no chance they're getting through those gates. So we can contain everyone and we can try to do that. No. They can go into that street. They've gone down that alley.
But they won't.
Fucking gone.
They won't. Don't worry. That will never happen.
Yeah, there's no chance they'll get through out of a set of doors and then one set of doors where we've got some guards stood out the front. There's no chance after that they'd get any further.
The doors could lock.
And we've got 4 snipers on a roof. So, we've got a building that has, hundreds, thousands maybe inside of these buildings. But 4 snipers or 6 snipers, they'll be able to do the job, no problem.
Yeah. There's only got to be 1 infected,
That would be
anything, it's overkill.
This isn't a virus that spreads in seconds, you know what I mean? Even when it's a zombie, if this was a standard zombies, for instance, this would make more sense because it takes longer for people to, turn in a lot of those kind of films. But this one, when it's literally 10, 15 seconds, they say, something like that. It's like, that's what I mean. It's fine, it's not like they become super fast or anything like that either,
Bloodthirst,
It just, a lot of these, the way that they're on about quarantining and containing them, it all, there is a certain logic that like some of the, like I just said, like some of it makes sense of what they have to do. But a lot of it doesn't make sense if you think of the wider fact that there's a lot of things that easily could have stopped them from getting to this point in the film.
Yeah, of course.
The fact that their quarantining place is to put them in a car park down at the bottom, instead of being like, basically, we have a set area for everyone to go. If there needs to be a quarantine, we have a set area of the building for everyone to be protected. No. Put them down at the bottom. Right near where there's a bunch of exits.
Yeah. And also, does like the handyman, does he need like the highest level of government clearance? Yeah. Like, does he? Like, maybe you just give him the toilets.
Yeah. The handyman. Oh shit! Yeah, we need to clear that bin in that room. It's like the idea that who's the guy that gets all the control? The cleaner can get into every single room in this building. It's like, should he?
Like General Stone, there's a bin in here that needs emptying.
Who the fuck's been eating a Twix in here?
Yeah.
Who the hell's been eating that rum? Like, why are we going into a quarantined room and being like, I've had my lunch. Yeah. Who needs to be cleaning this room?
Yeah. It's just weird, But this is kind of the thing where it all starts kicking off, and then it feels as if they just go, let's make a different film now, because you have and this is what I like about the first act and the lead up into the outbreak is you have it does seem to tease a more kind of character driven and a slightly more not to the level of 28
That is
days.
the plus side. It does feel like it feels like a smaller film in a bigger environment, but a smaller film still.
It feels like we've got to follow we've got to follow Don and the kids and maybe even the mum, and it feels as if like we're going to be stuck more with the core family. Yeah. And maybe what Don did, I know this has started the outbreak, but it's got to come back to kind of bite them a bit more in the ass, and there's got to be more confrontation around it. Yeah. In terms of like the characters having to acknowledge it and talk about it, and instead Dom just fucking caves his wife's head in and then disappears.
There's a weird logic in the idea of having like a film that was very much, and I remember they said they rewrote it because they wanted to go more to that kind of, to flesh out that family idea more, which is really an odd thing, because although I'd say like the little twist with the Robert Carlyle and making that bit, if that was part of that, then that's great. But the idea of then having kids that have been away from their parents for a long time just joined back with them, and now they're separated them around, and we're going to have two surrogate saviors to help them, kind of thing. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the idea of that, and not it being kind of more that about more maybe a redemption of Robert Carlyle's character,
redemption arc.
Felt more in line with what would have worked better, which is when films tried to go for more of the, again, the action route, instead of going like, actually, there could have been a really interesting story about him trying to get them, or even trying to get him and his wife out of this city when actually shit hits the fan in a different way, and they're actually trying to just survive as a family, and he has to redeem himself for that thing. And again, I'm not saying that sounds like a completely unoriginal. I'm sure we've got lots of zombie, that have a lot of focus on, family and stuff like that. It's just that, I guess when you've got these characters and you split them up, it feels like you've built up to something. Yeah. You've built up some characters already that are interesting, and then you dispose of them for, plot twisty, surprise, shock reasons. And I'm not saying anyone who watched this wouldn't have been really shocked when Robert Carlyle's character turned in the middle of that room and what he did to his wife. That's a goddamn shocking moment. So, it gets kudos for that. But it's weird. Sometimes those shocks can come at the expense of what sounded like a
better film.
Because, Jeremy Renner and Rose, they're fine, but they just, again, apart from a few like hero moments, and again, they are, again, kind of used for people they build up just to be shocks.
Well, this is effectively what I feel like where the film falls down, is it then becomes basically Jeremy Renner and Scarlett, Rose Byrne, who I was convinced was Jessica Alba. It becomes those two escorting the kids, and then there's
some ragtag bunch,
and literally these other two characters who don't even have names, who just I looked away.
Well, we get two that are shot really quickly.
Yeah.
So there are two of them, and then there's another two. I remember the lanky bloke. Yeah. And then there's one other one. I can't remember even who the other one is.
I remember there's one who gets who gets shot in the head, because it effectively goes. It then starts
going to shoot everyone. You don't actually see Jeremy Renner's character so much like disengaged. You can see he's not happy about the fact he has to shoot everyone down.
Yeah.
And then he's just kind of there in in the warehouse.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like it goes from like small, like one area where we have a chat, the warehouse, action scene. We're on the streets and there's a sniper. Oh, you need, some dude fucking tries to run out and he gets his head popped. Okay, Jeremy Renner's got to shoot this guy. And then next we are at like, we speak to the helicopter pilot in like a Metal Gear Solid like radio call where we're like, come and meet us here. Okay, I'll meet you there. And then they get there and something happens, and then they get to there's an action scene where the helicopter chops up a bunch of infected, which is cool, and you get the random guys.
You definitely move through the.
But it feels like it goes from like moment where we have a conversation, action piece. Moment where we have a conversation, action piece, and it's very quick.
And I think at times it also, to be honest, this is nearly twice the budget of the 28 Days Later.
Yeah, it was $50 million,
and much more consistent with its budget as well, technically, because theirs was like cancelled production nearly, and then they brought it back, and feels like so theirs was more like money coming in as it came along, kind of thing. Whereas this had a standard; they could pre-produce, they could decide what they were going to do. The guerrilla style of making of the original 28 Days Later is maybe partially what makes it good, and why it has a little bit of a third act kind of inconsistency in a little way. But this one it also falls in that line of it's a horror film with a bigger budget that's trying to do shots and stuff like that, but also at the same time still feels like it's having to hold back because it doesn't have that big of a budget.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So it feels like you get these like the alley scene, and you get, and it's also the weird. I don't know why, and it's not a fib, but it's the fact that they're like in London. And then we go to that, like you said, the helicopter scene. Yeah. So they get out to somewhere that feels much more country.
Yeah, it does.
From the city of London, which is not exactly, it feels like a completely different destination.
It's quite hilly.
So if anyone who knows, that would feel a little bit like, it's not that there's not greenery there, and there are areas on the outskirts, but for them to do that and then be like, now we're going to go back over, now you've got to go back over to Wembley. It's like, wait a second. Now you've got to go back into the city. You've come away from the city.
We're in zone 4.
Now it feels like you've already, like when they're at that field, it feels like you've already. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's not, because isn't it meant to be Hyde Park?
I don't think
it's meant to be Hyde Park.
Maybe it's meant to be, but Hyde Park.
He says, "I'll meet you." I think he says, "I'll meet you in Hyde Park." It's definitely not Hyde Park.
Yeah.
It looks nothing like Hyde. It looks far too like hilly. Literal countryside. So they've obviously shot it in that. And it has this incredible moment when the guy comes out. You got the one lanky guy. I don't know what his name is.
He just jumps on.
He freaks out. He jumps onto the bottom of the helicopter because he says, "I'm not taking you guys. I'm not going to do it." He's like, "I've got to keep going." And then obviously when he jumps on. He's like, fuck this. And he basically infects the guy by the fact that he goes and flies with the copter and cuts up a bunch. Really cool, really cool line. I'm not sure it makes any sense with a virus that literally you get a single drop in your eye could turn you. So even him in the helicopter, the amount of blood that splats around it,
would be cool.
You're like, this is a fucking dumb idea, mate. It really Like, I don't actually know how this happened. You know what would be helpful? If you didn't want them, maybe let them all get into the helicopter, fly a little bit and say, now you've got to get out.
Yeah.
That's it. We're not going any further. Now I'm going to fucking chop these dudes up for this really cool scene that will look awesome.
It is super cool.
And it is really cool. That's what I said. Like, it is like this is a really cool shot. The logic makes very little sense.
Oh yeah, those
cool.
Blades would be
and then the guy, the guy gets infected basically on the edge of it because he literally gets covered in blood. So the blood's all over him. So he does get infected, but it doesn't matter because a minute later he gets dropped off and smacks the ground anyway. And that's what I just thought really. I like we said
Regent's
at the start.
Park apparently. I just read this. But even I'm looking at it on.
It still definitely. It looks like the middle of a countryside.
Yeah, I've looking at it now, and
it literally looks like you should be seeing cows and things like that. It's that
hills,
kind of.
Isn't there?
It definitely is. It just feels like a completely different place. Maybe it's just for anyone outside the UK, I'm sure maybe that would be like
That's Regent's Park.
It just looks like they're already far enough away that it's like that's fine. But and then we said before that about the helicopter, Flynn's whole logic of, I'm going to go and meet you in a different location. I've got to go now. I'm not going to let those guys in. I'll go meet you in everything. But there's also a weird kind of to his voice of like, maybe I'm going to make you have to go, good, another couple of, another ton of miles across, and then, and I'll see you again, mate. Yeah, I'll see you on the other side, because I'm not putting you majorly in danger that you're probably going to die. Now, I'll see you on the other side, mate.
Yeah, I'll go
I'm definitely going to see you again, aren't I? And those are really fit. But going back into that, like, actually, like, we're back into the city, and, you know, we arrive back in, and this is kind of the, you know, the car and the smoke, and, you know, that's happening. And there's a couple of scenes in between this, I think, of Idris Elba and General Stone. And
I don't think there is.
They're just like pointless.
I think he says, "Oh, we're gonna carpet bomb fucking." So, you know, whatever.
He tells them what they're going to do. They're like, "You need to get out.
You need to get out," and he's like, "Okay, I'm going." And then Robert Carlyle, I think, like walks into an alley. No, he doesn't even. He walks into like an alley. Yeah. And then, like, the firebomb hits, and you're like, oh, well, the fire... It shows the firebomb, like, hitting and then spreading. Yeah. And he goes into an alley, so you're like, well, he's fucking gone.
Yeah, I had even this part of the plot, I had a real problem with the idea that, like, I was just there like, well, what was the fucking point of that? You achieved basically nothing. I'm sure you may have killed some infected, but it feels like you didn't do something that actually helped the thing, because there still seems to be an absolute ton of infected afterwards.
Yeah.
And literally the fact that you can carpet bomb an entire bloody city, but Robert Carlyle can stand in an alley and somehow survive.
Well, you just have like a bridge.
It even defied, like, that scene alone, that defied the logic of how fire moves, which, like, later on, like, Jeremy Renner, like, when they're down in the tunnel, the fire keeps coming down and goes up the stairs with them. Like, they have to literally escape. Yeah. Whereas, again, Robert Carlyle, as his zombie, for plot armour, can stand what looks like at the side of an alleyway. And the fire doesn't touch him. No, it goes straight past. It's just like, the fire either moves in the way you want it to move, or it doesn't. But you've already established the fire move. Like, it's either fire will only go in a straight line. I'm not saying scientifically that makes sense, but fire either won't go in there or it will.
Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Why did we just carpet bomb an entire city if we actually didn't know where the infected are, to be like, right, there's infected here, here, and here. We need to do these areas. No, they just blindly just fucking right all of the streets around here, but there is a clear big stretch of streets then on the side of these that are like, so they couldn't have gone that far in that time. No, because you seem to be doing like a straight line. Yeah. And then you don't do any more. And it's just like, I was just there like, what?
Just
and then it's the fact that if that was then like, oh, basically we've taken them all out except for Robert Carlyle, who somehow has to survive. I can almost it's like more, but it's the fact that like 2 minutes later they then show a shot of basically this huge horde of rage monsters. Yeah. Like, this is like, you've just made that feel so pointless. Like, so I'm not saying that we're meant to be like General Stone is making good arguments, because again, this is around the time that we see basically the last shot of him in the film, of like, where we see like those huge group of rage monsters in the street, and you're like, right, you're not blown up, but you're not finished. So what happens to you guys? I don't know. We're just going to ignore that and let's move on. And now we've got smoky streets, and we've got a weird gas that's coming through the street where they're trying to smoke out.
Well, this is it. So we have that scene where the helicopter is quite cool, and then, you know, they have the bit where they're talking about like Scarlett and Jeremy Renner. I just keep talking. I'm mixing character names and actor names. Where they're talking.
Doyle and Scarlett
are talking, and they say, "Oh, you know, the mum was asymptomatic. We think it could be. You know, we think that they could
these children at all
we need to protect them. They're more important than us." And then the next bit is where the nerve gas is being dropped, and I like Jeremy Renner's death. I think it's really good, and there's a brutality to it where he realizes that he's fucked. You see the people in the gas mask behind burning the corpses.
There's the brutality to that one works well with the logic of what we said earlier, where they start taking out basically everyone, because it's like, we can't tell who's who, so we're going to have to just wipe them all out. That logic, or what, like that brutality logic in the film, that actually works very well. What happens to him is like, they're not going to stop. They're going through nerve, gas and stuff like that. They're not going to be like, "Oh, you alright, mate? You got ID?" No, they're just they're destroying anything. They're killing everything.
Anything,
and that is a huge part of the thing. And I like that part of the plot. It just is undermined by a lot of other logic.
But what for me is that basically he, Jeremy Renner makes his sacrifice, and it's really brutal because you see him get like cooked up, and then you see like him like walking
on fire. So he's like, he's not just like out straight away. He's
alive.
He's burning to death.
He's burning to death. and then they go, and then the next scene is, you know.
And again, I think that's a kind of shock scene because they're very much set up. I think, again, playing on the original film where you have basically a man, a woman, and a kid.
Yeah.
And the idea that in the original film they actually managed to overcome it and survive. We've now done the opposite.
The opposite.
Been like, we've got these ragtag bunch, and now actually one by one they're all just dying.
And then they get the scene where they go into the into the London Underground, and I think like it is a good scene. I like that we have this night vision kind of, you know, the night vision scope, and Scarlett's kind of, you know, guiding them through. But then you're like, you know that it's pitch black and these things are attracted by noise, and you're like screaming like, oh, there's a body, no, to your left, and you think like, if they'd have just made that thing of being like a bit more subtle around it, it would do great. Because when Robert Carlyle does come back into it, and you see him like in the scope walk behind, you're like, fuck, that's a really good shot. It's creepy, and her death is really good. You know, when she gets her head fucking.
Oh yeah, it is really like, it's shocking. It definitely is like shocking in that thing. It's really good. I don't know. I just felt a bit like by that point it was just like we are just trying to like go out of our way to shock you at this point.
I liked it, but I
like the way it's shot. I like the look of it. It is shocking that she dies. It's like, oh Jesus Christ! Like, so this film is good for shocks.
Yeah, but what I kind of don't like, and what happens every time I watch it, and I say every time as if I watch it all the time, but every time I have watched
every time you watch it daily.
Every time I watch it every day, I forget that the first part is more character driven and does it, and then it feels like as soon as the stampede happens and they're out on the streets of London, it seems as if this takes place in like 15 minutes, and it's just they're like, fuck. Like there's loads of foreplay, and then they just lube up and go hell to leather to nut, you know.
But this is the main, and this is what I think, again, going back to character, is what makes a huge difference between this and 28 Days Later. Because 28 Days Later, the same. They go on a journey technically, and they go in a destination, and they have to go through that. But there's lots of points along the way where they get this chance to kind of have these moments and have these little moments to take in what's around them, which makes the film seem quite like nice and makes you kind of become endeared to some of the characters and things like that. Whereas in this one, it's just and I understand with the plot that is kind of what has to kind of happen, this breakneck kind of, we need to escape, we need to get here. But the problem at the same time that then comes with that is the fact that we get no real time for Doyle and Scarlett and these two kids to really feel like there's any kind of actual bond there.
No.
So they all just feel like completely like expendable. Like, I don't feel the kids in themselves are even, for the ones that basically technically become our almost main characters, the kids don't feel like we get enough of them to like really feel like we know. We don't get enough time to feel, and I don't always feel like you get enough time to feel like they're actually kids.
No.
To add that kind of scary part of it, the fact that they are actually kids going through these bits, because they're just basically just like, move, next one. It feels like it is like right, we're just going from this destination to this day. We're doing to these little spots, and we're going across there. And there's no stop in between, like you said, apart from these like action-y zombie film, you know. And it just feels like that keeps going, which is why, again, it feels like, you know, again, like, it's a really shocking thing when Jeremy Renner's and when Rosebud and Scarlett dies and things like that. They're shocking because they're well done and they're thought well about like how to make their death seem quite horrible.
Yeah.
But in terms of like caring much about the characters and stuff like that, I feel like you haven't had enough time to. You feel like you've been told, and it I guess in the same way, it's almost a bit like when the kids like kind of only somewhat react to these. It's like, oh, I guess you didn't really know them, did you?
I thought Scarlett was going to survive.
Yeah, it did seem like Scarlett. That's why I say it is like a shot. It did seem like she's made it this far. So, like, again, like a part of this film is about going for the shocks, isn't it? It's about like, they won't be expecting her to get taken out right now. You know what I mean? It's kind of like anybody can die. So again, but and then like obviously after this, it's not very.
After this, Robert Carlyle turns out.
Yeah, Robert Carlyle. Sorry, I'm skipping him there. Yeah, and again, I get the. I mean, I can get it. The idea feels as if he must be tracking the sun. As if he's more like tracking the asymptomatic scent or something. Because the fact that he's so easily able to get so far,
and just
it's such a distance. They drove They went through, you know what I mean? They drove through these things. They went for that. So the fact that he's able to get all the way across the city is already quite the moment that they managed to get.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It was a bit like, okay, like how
did you get here, Robert
work?
Carlyle?
You know, especially when like they were away. A certain extent away when those bombs went off, whereas he was still in an alley.
Was in an alley.
You know what I mean? So he's already far away. And it already feels like there's lots of things, even if I said an animal that was tracking you, would be like, well, I've definitely lost the scent now. I mean, there's goddamn smoke everywhere. I'm not going to smell shit. But somehow he's still able to get there. It just feels very like... convenient that he's able to get there and things like that. And there's part of me that just feels like maybe I do feel like his story should have ended back in the building, and he shouldn't have been this glaring as if we need to have a main boss to get to the end.
It was so
it feels like we've got a lot of video game logic in this.
It feels like a boss fight with Robert Carlyle on the platform, you know.
You know, and and you get the whole, he bites the side, like Jesus Christ, oh crap, like is the kid going to turn? But again, if you've been listening to the asymptomatic, you're like, I don't think the kid is going to go.
Yeah.
And then she has to shoot her dad. You know, that's kind of brutal. You know, that she has to like blast him in the head.
But also, they've only had like one scene together.
Yeah.
Which is when he tells, they reunite. He shows him around the
apart from seeing them like in a hotel room from Jeremy Renner's Doyle's perspective, like bouncing on the bed and like having a little like in the hotel.
You don't really see them.
But he mainly seems quite cold towards them as well. Like he doesn't come across like he's lying anyway, but he doesn't come straight across like he's like, oh yeah. I mean, I guess he picked them up at the station. And again, we've come back round to another tube, so we've got that kind of come round moment. He collected them, and now they're killing them off where they drop off.
But it feels like it's not really fleshed out enough, you know. And it feels like you said, either commit to having Robert Carlyle being this kind of like tracker, or being like more of a present threat who's just not, make him almost like a Scottish Michael Myers, where he's like not going to stop. Instead of just like
occasionally throwing like he stood just across. You've got shots where it's like, is the child seeing him or is he actually stood there?
Yeah.
And it's like that. It's like, okay, I guess I could do that. Because otherwise, I don't know why he'd be stood there and then disappear. He would just be legging it straight at you, surely, because he's a rage monster.
He's a rage monster.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it just felt a bit of a stretch in the logic of like what we knew of the rage monsters. Like this could happen. It felt a bit like tacked on. Like we had to have like. And again, one of the things I think the original film does like not go into is the idea that we have to have this big like main creature or this main like all kind of moment like that, like some other zombie films do have that kind of moment of we have to have more of a main threat at the end kind of thing. But it felt like the whole film was they're on high level threat, so I don't think you needed it.
No, it's odd. It's a weird.
And it felt too quick at the end anyway. It wasn't like a big thing. It was like it almost felt like it was. Oh, let's make sure that at the last minute we definitely push this like asymptomatic. Right, the kid is definitely asymptomatic. Here he is. His eyes change.
Yeah, don't worry about it. He'll be fine.
And it feels even less so that now, if the kid walked up like that, the guy who is in the helicopter should be like, nah, fucking way.
Yeah,
not fucking happen.
Or just gun him down.
Look at your fucking like, right, kids, bye. Like, I'm gonna fly off. Now.
I'm off.
Yeah, it's the fact that now it's like. It's because Doyle obviously lost his life for them that he's like, okay, I guess I should.
I'll take you,
And then a scene that I believe was shot 2 weeks before this film was actually like released, apparently. So they literally did this tagged on little coda scene where you have, we have the idea of the helicopter.
Yeah,
it's now empty, and then you get the shot of the Eiffel Tower, and you get the which is why it's a very simple kind of shot, I think.
Yeah,
because they literally just went across and into France, and they did like a 1 day kind of quick like shoot with people going away.
Even 1 day,
But I also like it's that kind of ending on. Again, it's more open than that. It could be seen as a very bleak ending.
Yeah,
I mean it is because it now shows that it's gone across to another country, and we have now spread, whereas before it sounded like it was much more contained. But it also gives the idea that maybe the helicopter and stuff's empty, which gives a bad idea of what actually happened, and it seems as though the boy's gone over there and possibly the reason that this is spread.
I mean, I imagine so.
Yeah,
because
which
he can still spread it, can't he?
And implies the idea that every one of them just went and died, which which is kind of what the original film partially kind of avoided with their original like ending of like Cillian Murphy's son, Cillian Murphy's character dying because it felt like a weak idea when you think of the character arc. It felt pointless.
Yeah.
And this tacked on scene to me kind of again makes it feel like all of that journey, all of that thing. If we were going to go through that high for like. It feels a bit pointless if there was no resolution to it. And the fact we cut straight from the helicopter, we don't even get the nice 28 days later they survived in the far, you know.
Yeah.
Like, really, like, I love the ending of the original 28 days later because I think it's a film that's very bleak and thing. It gives a moment of hope. Whereas this film just, again, like, going throughout the whole film and leaning in very much to the hopelessness of everything and the bleakness of everything and the shocks, needing to do the shocks. It feels very much like the John Carlos here is very much going for this kind of very, you know, bleak ending zombie film that you get with quite a lot of them where it's like, nah, we're going to end on a completely like, the world's fucked.
The world's cooked, yeah.
You know, so at the end of 28 weeks later, it kind of leaves the idea that the rest of the world's probably now fucked as well. Which... Again, I guess with 28 years later, it'll be interesting whether they are like, yeah, no, that happened, or actually they contain that really fast, and no, it's just a British thing. We're just staying British.
Well, they've said that they are accepting that 28 weeks later is part of the canon. So I don't know I don't know whether they'll directly acknowledge it. 28 years.
I mean, my hope is that like this, because this was wider, my hope is that it very much stays contained to that one little, which I think
it will. I think it'll get a throwaway. It'll get a throwaway line, like they'll mention that there was an infection in Paris or something like that. You know,
I think one thing that generally that it didn't feel like 28 Days Later or Danny Boyle or Alex Barnes seemed that interesting was basically telling us what the whole world was dealing with. It felt very much like they wanted to tell the small, intimate story of this group of people. You could have told lots of different people. You could have had more mention about what happens in the whole world. They could have widened it out to be more, but it felt like very much like they were staying close to this thing. They didn't want to tell what every government agency had to do in order to contain, you know.
And there's certain, you know, there's kind of like a certain truth to that, isn't there? Like, if that happened, you know, if something like this happened, 99% chance that you're not going to find out what happens. 99% chance is that, like, once something like this happens and electricity's gone and Wi-Fi's gone and radio, you know, towers are gone, you're not going to find. You're not even going to find out what's happening in this country.
It's the one thing that made, say, The Walking Dead really good to begin with, was the fact that it's all isolated. They were going from place to place, and the danger was the fact they never know
what's going to happen,
what's actually coming. Like, they don't know what people are like now. They don't know what's really happened to the whole world. You know, they don't really know what's going on. And that isolation is what made it good. That is also one thing that I think we said in the last episode is also what could feel really worn out, is the problem of, like, technically what 28 Days Later introduced is now something that a lot of other shows have ran with.
It is so standard. It's so boilerplate.
So the idea of doing that little character piece with 28 years later may become a little bit like, I feel like we've seen this.
Exactly.
I've watched 11 seasons of The Walking Dead.
You know?
And it's many spin-offs. I've seen this like so many times that this film feels like it's not giving as much new.
Yeah.
You know, again, all the hope is laid on the fact that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland especially is a very good writer-director, so I'm hoping
we'll see
that will be a thing. But it's weird. Like, again, I had heard so many people that 28 Weeks Later is better than 28 Days Later. It's a better film, it's better, you know, like, better made, it's better, and, you know, I can't say about, like, the video quality over time is the fact that this film, you know, right now in time, you know, will still be watchable probably in the near future, whereas 28 Days Later may, if it doesn't find a way to upgrade the quality of the image, may one day be almost unwatchable on most TVs or devices whenever we go beyond, you know, 4K, 8K, sorry, when we get to
16K.
When we get to whatever number K we're going to get to, or whatever else they decide to call it after that, you know, when we get to that point, and it's like basically like, what the fuck is that grainy thing?
It's just burning my eyes.
It's just like so terrible, but yeah, I do think it's hard not to say that, you know, not only the characterization, but also I think the way it was shot and the you know, the overall structure of the film, you know, has both the light and the dark elements that make it interesting. Whereas I think this one is very much leans into the dark and the bleakness.
Yeah.
It never really pops its head away from it.
No, and I think it leans into too much into action, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like it does have that kind of American gloss to it.
It's that sequel that has more money and goes, we can do more with this, but
Yeah.
does it? I don't think it does it in the right way.
No.
When we say do more to this, it's more keep it small character, but maybe that means it gives you more opportunities to show more interesting scenes that would have cost more money.
Yeah.
You know, interesting shots of London that would have been like, or other areas of the country, or things like that would be like, actually that's really like, look at that shot, look how look how we can use that. But I even know this film that they were specifically like, you had to be like a ballet artist, a dancer, things like that, to be able to be the Rage Monsters. And if I'm honest, I don't think the Rage Monsters movements and stuff were stand out, whereas in the first film they had some really interesting ways that they showed. It might just be because a lot of the Rage Monsters I don't think are ever clearly shown, apart from Robert Carlyle. The rest of them are kind of just background figures running around.
Chopped up, and
they're not really they're not moving.
Yeah.
Whereas in the first one you had ones coming out of windows, smashing through windows, climbing on things, stood there like moving around. It felt like the body movement was
a bit
real
more contorted and a bit odd.
Yeah, and each Rage Monster felt slightly different, which again could be based on how much rage can come out in each person, or how they move, but the way they hopped on top of cars and moved their bodies, and I felt like that was really again what made the Rage Monster scary was really lacking here. And a lot of that scariness, I think John Carlos replaced it with more the way to get them is to shock them to feel like they're not safe with anybody. But and that can be great, and it is great in this for many of the deaths is one thing that definitely stands out as a strong part of this, but it's a double-ended sword.
Yes,
it's it's one of those problems of you can do that, but at the same time it's hard not to always feel like sometimes that also kind of, especially when you do it multiple times in the same film, it feels like sometimes that actually means that you've had to be like, fuck characterization, because we can shock them with this, or fuck what would actually work better in the plot, because we're going to shock them with this death.
And I also feel like there's so much focus on set pieces, whereas when you're looking at having a bigger budget, and it definitely does have more of an inflated budget than 28 Days Later, but it kind of leans into, well, we need more set pieces, whereas I feel like if they'd have maybe held back on some of that, and still had some big set pieces, because the set pieces are decent. It just feels like it just has to go from one set piece, small bit of dialogue, the other set piece, almost as if they were like, let's just make a bunch of set pieces, and then they realised we have to have characterization, we have to have talking in this film. So I don't know.
I think that even to me, like I said about the ending, the fact that they don't feel that they have to actually give you any kind of resolution for what happens to the characters apart from getting on a helicopter mainly, I think also speaks to the fact that they're not really thinking about so much the characters as they are what's going to look cool. A helicopter in the middle of Wembley Stadium, that looks cool.
That's cool.
When they fly off from it, don't give a fuck.
Well, I guess you don't get a massive amount of resolution with 28 Days Later. But and I guess they're trying to do...
a character arc, which I don't think is so much here with any of the characters in this film.
Not really.
Robert Carlyle's is the only one that gets a really interesting beginning to his arc, and then a not so interesting way it goes.
Because you're right. Once they get on the helicopter, they do. They kind of go out, and then it's just implied. It's very much like the crash happens. Or you're assuming a crash happens, and then the boy must spread it because he's the one who's got it. So did he kiss someone? Is the boy kiss the helicopter pilot?
Or is it because he literally got chopped and basically got broken to blood and stuff like that, and it's basically the blood's out there, so now someone's actually got it on them.
Someone's got it. And I think it's that thing, maybe they were like, oh, we want to keep it open just in case we ever want to dip our toes back into it, but it feels like there could have been something a little bit better. Yeah,
I think just a little bit underworld, and that's why, to be honest, to a lot of people, I would be like, when was the last time you watched it? Because I can remember. I think the first time you watched this, maybe with the shocks that come and the brutal deaths and stuff like that. Some of those things stood out. but it's hard not to be, when it annoys when you think about it, and when you've got well, to be honest, when you've got like characters that basically feel like it goes nowhere for them, and there's nothing that really happens to them, it's quite easy to like be like, that's not a long-standing like film in your mind. And that might be why I remembered the opening clearly. I remembered the part of the Danny Boyle shot. Yeah, I remembered that opening scene really, really clearly. Yeah, and the bit with his wife and the bit with Jeremy Renner burning. Those bits were like, oh, actually, no, I do know this. Yeah, but that was pretty much the only bits that really stuck a chord in my mind. The rest of it was just, yeah, okay. It was part of me being like, I can remember why I probably wouldn't remember this, because there's just an overall vanilla-ness at times to it. It's like, outside of the death scenes, the rest of it feels a little bit underbaked.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
And I think it speaks more for the fact that I think I'd like to believe for most people, if they rewatched 28 Days Later, that they would feel that they got more, like, both, in terms of horror and also in terms of emotion, maybe, within the film, than this film really ever gives you. Because even then, as we said, like, the deaths are shocking, but I can't, apart from that car park basement scene, which I think was kind of scary, and the scene obviously with Robert Carlyle and his wife is scary, but apart from that, I can't say that this film's scary. Whereas the first 28 Days Later, some of those scenes were like shit.
It was a bit more horror.
that was tense. That was really suspenseful. That was really like, oh shit, and there's not tons of them in the film, to be fair, but some of those scenes really hit hard.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it. Do you have anything else to say to wrap him up?
That's pretty much all I've got. I'm out of tank like that helicopter must have been.
Yeah, because he never refills, does he? He just flies around all day.
He just flies around all day. He wasted the goddamn thing by fucking teasing Jeremy Renner's character, but be like, now you have to go to the next.
Now you have to go to the next random park. That's probably why they crashed, ran out of fuel. I don't know. I feel like, because I remember being in the camp that enjoyed this more than 28 Days Later, but it still suffers from the same flaws that I kind of remember having. And I think it's those initial kind of shock moments that did stick out in my head. But I think it isn't a film that holds much water when you actually try and look at it a bit more.
It's not bad.
No, it's not bad.
It's a good watch in a way. It's just it falls very much for me in that kind of that standard, kind of closer to that standard zombie film where you can watch it. It's entertaining enough, but 28 Days Later is more kind of Romero early stuff.
Whereas
it's
had a different name.
This would fall more into the closer to maybe the Land of the Dead or so. Like like the later stuff. Not the late stuff.
Land of the Dead's fun, but I feel like if it wasn't called 28 Weeks Later and it was called something else, you'd be like, it's a decent film. Yeah. But it would just kind of be in that kind of mid-2000s jumble pile of films.
It works with that in comparison. I think if you put it comparatively alongside 28 Days Later, I think you realise that actually that was actually quite a quality piece of filmmaking. Yeah. Not just in terms of thing. Whereas, and that's what the new film, again, the new film has that same thing standing against it as luckily that one is by Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, but it's everyone will be looking back to the original and be like, have you captured that essence? Yes. Or does it feel like you're just giving us an episode of The Walking Dead?
That's it. And I don't know, because I feel like the films, they're a bit hit and miss, and I'll be honest.
It's the actors and directors that are giving me hope in this one, that actually it will be enjoyable. It's got Ralph Fiennes, it's got Aaron Taylor Johnson, it's got Jeremy Curl, it's got some fantastic actors in it. Yeah, so that's that may raise it enough anyway to be good enough, but I'm just hoping it's actually a scary horror film at the same time.
I guess there's only one way we're going to find out, and that will be
come back in 28 years later.
Yeah, come back in 28 years and we will finally watch it. So that's us covering 28 Weeks Later. Come and let us know your thoughts on the film and how it stacks up to 28 Days, and if you are eagerly anticipating 28 Years Later, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter at CMTH Podcast. Now remember, if you do happen to find your spouse kind of after you've left them in a horrid, bloodthirsty, rage-induced scenario where the world has been dominated by these creatures, and you do happen to leave them, and then they resurface, and they may be asymptomatic but still potentially a carrier, don't kiss them, because you'll just cave their head and re-spread this virus. But what you can do is hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review, and we will see you next week. Take care, goodbye.